You might have heard about a new federal savings program, one that's designed to give kids a real financial head start. Well, in California, that same program is sparking some major controversy. The state's tax agency is taking a lot of heat for a decision that critics have, well, nicknamed the Toddler Tax.
So what is this toddler tax? Is California actually, taxing toddlers? Well, not directly. It's a pretty catchy name for a really tangled situation. Basically, California is refusing to follow the federal tax rules for these new kids' savings plans. And the result is that the growth in these accounts gets taxed.
So today, we're going to break it all down for you. We'll get into what these savings accounts are, why California is doing its own thing, and what it all really means for families on the ground. And all this comes from the excellent investigative reporting over at Shasta Unfiltered. All right, let's get right into it. To really wrap our heads around this whole mess, we first have to talk about the federal program that's at the heart of it all. They're being called the Trump accounts. So think of these accounts as a new way to give every kid in America a financial leg up from day one. The whole idea, when it was signed into law back in 2025, was to help all families, it doesn't matter what your income is, start saving for their kids' future. So here's how the federal program is supposed to work. It's pretty straightforward, really. Every kid born between 2025 and 2028, they get $1,000 from the government to get started. Just like that. Then families, friends, whoever, can chip in up to $5,000 a year. But here's the absolute key part. On the federal level, all the money it earns from investments, it grows completely tax-free until the kid turns 18. And this is where things get messy. This is the heart of the conflict. See, most states just, line up their tax rules with federal programs like this, but not California. The state decided to go its own way. Their argument is that their tax code doesn't just automatically update with new federal laws. They'd need to pass a specific state law for that, and, well, they haven't. And that creates a really complicated and, frankly, expensive twist for families. I mean, look at this. The difference is just night and day. Under federal rules, that account grows tax-free. Simple. But in California, nope. The state taxes any investment growth every single year. And get this, if a company, maybe a parent's employer, contributes, California treats that as income right now. So for parents, it's a total nightmare. You have to keep two completely different sets of books, one for the feds and a whole separate one for the state. So just how big of a deal is this tax? We're talking a potential hit of up to 13.3%. That's California's top income tax rate. Think about that. That's a huge chunk of a kid's savings that's just gone, paid to the state every year instead of growing and compounding for their future. So what's the bottom line for California families? It's pretty simple, really. More paperwork, more headaches, and, most importantly, less money for their kid when they turn 18. The whole point of the account is for the money to grow, right? Well, California is just chipping away at that growth year after year after year. Now, as you can probably guess, this has caused a ton of backlash, which leads to the big question. Is this just a boring tax code thing, or is there something more political going on here? And that's where things get really heated. Opponents are not mincing words. Take the group Americans for Tax Reform. They put out a statement calling this, and I'm quoting here, Gavin Newsom's toddler tax, and said it will raid kids' Trump accounts. Pretty strong language. So the core argument from critics is that this is basically a political move. They're saying it's a job at a program that happens to be associated with a former president. The claim is that state leaders are putting party politics ahead of the financial futures of kids in their own state. And so far, despite all this criticism, the governor's office hasn't shown any signs they're planning to change course. Okay, so let's set the politics aside for a second and talk about what this really means for a family in California. A family just trying to save up for their kid's future. What's the actual real-world impact? Well, it sets off this really damaging chain reaction. First, you've got those annual state taxes just eating into any investment gains. Over 18 years, that really slows down the magic of compound interest, so the total amount in the account is way less than it should be. And finally, you have to wonder, right? All this extra hassle and lower returns, it might just make families say, you know what, forget it. And then they miss out on a program that's actually helping people in other states. To put it in a way that really hits home, critics have been using this powerful analogy. They say California is basically robbing kids' piggy banks just to make a political point. It's a really vivid image, and it captures that long-term financial hit we've been talking about.
And by the way, this whole breakdown, all this information, is based on some fantastic investigative reporting from Shasta Unfiltered. They've been following this story from the beginning and are continuing to cover it as it all unfolds.
You know, this whole situation is a perfect example of that friction we sometimes see between state and federal rules. And it really leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? When policy and politics collide like this, who's the one that really pays the price?